There's been a long history between software teams and security teams of we haven't always had good relationships. And I think that there is a natural reluctance, a natural skepticism in software teams with security. Sometimes they believe, because they've had bad experiences, it's always going to be terrible. And so I think while, there's no team that, is going to be good or bad, you can sometimes tell in an early conversation if they've had a bad experience before. And sometimes they need a little bit more help and encouragement just to know that it doesn't have to be like that. For us, we believe that security is part of software quality, just like observability and scalability and usability. And so when you make it part of the software engineer's world and you say, I trust you, you do this well already, let me help you, that changes the dynamic.
Welcome to the Elephant in AppSec, the podcast to explore, challenge, and boldly face the AppSec elephants in the room. I'm Alexandra, your host, joined by my amazing co-host Tristan, a former security engineer and co-founder of Escape. Today, we're excited to have an amazing guest, Laura Balmain, join us. With over 20 years in software development and application security, Laura is the co-founder and CEO of SafeStack, an online education platform that offers secure development training for fast-moving companies. Laura is also a well-known keynote speaker and spoken at high-profile events like BlackHat USA, NDC, and OSCON. With her love of speaking and being heavily invested in the community, Laura hosts her own podcast, Build Amazing Things Securely, where she collects various stories from AppSec professionals. More than that, she's a regular writer for a range of technology publications and is the co-author of Agile Application Security and Security for Everyone. If you want to learn practical advice on how to adapt an efficient and enjoyable LEGO approach to training programs for your teams and build a great security-minded tech team, tune in into our conversation. By the end of the podcast, you'll have an answer to the question: can developers and security training really coexist? Hi, Laura. We're very happy to have you with us on our podcast today. So it's been a while since we last talked about the possibility of doing a podcast together, and I'm happy that it's finally happening this year. And this year is also a big year for you, because I saw that in 2024, actually it's going to be 10 years almost since you've started to run SafeStack.
Absolutely.
So it's a huge date.
Absolutely. And they say it takes you 10 years to be an overnight success. So this could be it. This could be the year.
It's possible. Yeah. So
we wish it for you.
We'll cross fingers for you.
Thank you.
So how did you actually get, initially into the security training space? How did you thought of it?
So I would love to say I had a really clear plan, but I didn't. I was working as a security leader in application security, and I really believed we could do things differently. So 10 years ago, it was still very, very slow. DevSecOps wasn't really a thing yet. And I really wanted to prove that we could do application security without getting in the way. So we could do it very fast, and we could do it in a way that was focused on developers, not just on security and risk. And so I quit my job and I started doing consultancy and in-person training. And as part of that, I developed techniques and approaches that I then wrote about in a book. And over time, that then got to where we are now, where the training that I used to deliver in person, we've now turned into an entire program so that we can help organizations all around the world to bring application security through their software development lifecycle without getting in the way.
And then where in the world do you see the most interest in that?
Well, so we're a tiny company. There's only 12 of us, but we have organizations now in 89 countries, which is very surprising because I tend to forget that software is built all over the world, everywhere. And so there's a lot of folks in the US. There's a lot of folks in Australia because of where I'm based in New Zealand. We haven't done much talking in Europe yet, so there are a few, but we actually were going to be over in Europe doing a lot of conferences and things this year to meet some folks and say hello and hopefully bring some security to European-built software as well.
Excellent.
I hope so.
Yeah.
So once you're in Paris, you can come and say hi to us. So be very happy.
I'd love that.
Because we are doing like a lot of meetups, with the security communities as well. So it's also for us a
Amazing.
great way, to bring different topics and actually educate, people who are interested in the security. So what would you say, would be the main lessons that you've learned, interacting with so many countries, customers for so long? Like, what did you learn?
I think that a lot of the reasons we don't do so much security in software is not because we don't want to. It's because of the pressure we're under as software teams and how fast we need to go all the time. Our sprints are packed with, so many stories each time. There's never going to be extra time for more things. So we have to find ways to weave security very subtly through the things that we already do. So we're not going to be able to say stop work and do, I need to do a sprint that's all security. That will never work. What we aim for and what we find works is, instead of doing security as this big separate thing, try and aim for just 1 hour of security activity every sprint. So 1 hour every 2 weeks. And when you break it down into those tiny little actions, and then you do them consistently over time, you can make huge changes to the security of your software, but without distracting you from your day-to-day work as an engineer.
And how did you get, the first teams on board, and actually how did you pitch, this concept to them?
So we started to become a product company in 2020 in the middle of COVID. So in 2020, we shifted from being consultants and services to building a software platform. And that was it was a very silly thing to do. It was very hard. But what we did was what most entrepreneurs, what most young companies do, made a lot of phone calls, connected with a lot of people that I knew from previous jobs and things to validate and to talk through people. And we had our first 25 customers on board within 4 months. So it's very manual in those early days. There's a lot of relationships, there's a lot of conversations. But now we've got about 1,500 organizations on the platform. And now people will find us organically. So they will find us online, they'll see a conference talk, they'll see something we've done. So all of those foundations that were very hard, they've grown over time.
What kind of companies are working with you? Is it big companies or also startups, of all size? What's the general kind of teams that end up on your platform?
So our smallest are just a couple of people, tiny startups with big dreams.
Okay.
But we have everything up to national level banks.
Okay.
So we've built the platform to be self-service. So and we have a startup program for young companies so they can get a big discount, and we try and make it very, very easy to start as soon as possible. And then we have more complex solutions and ways of helping for larger organizations. So it really is very spread, but what is common is these are engineering teams who want to build great software. They want to do a great job and they know security matters, and they just need a bit of help to get started, to figure out how to make that work for them.
Okay. And when you're in a situation where, for instance, a national size bank, the big banks, the big corporations, do you go through a regular process for sales process with talking with everyone, the CISO, the development team, the procurement, or is it more the developers using your platform and then spreading inside of the organization?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
So the engineers will find us first, and then they will come in and they'll sneak and sign up on their Gmail address and they'll have a play. And
Okay.
then we'll normally get a phone call from a very confused CISO or head of engineering who would like to know why their team is asking them for security things, because their devs have very rarely
Yeah.
ever asked for security before.
Yeah.
And so we will go from this exploration with the developers through to then a more formalized procurement process, which can take a bit of time. But because the engineers have already decided this is useful to them and they've proven engagement, it's a bit easier than it would be if we were coming in cold.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And in this kind of situation, you have to go through the normal process of justifying the return on investment.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how do you do that? Because this can be useful for like development teams willing to make their CISO adopt or unlock budget for security training for developers. So as a developer, how do I go to my CISO and justify the return on investment of like
So
this kind of stuff?
let me be really honest. And as an engineer, you know, I think all of us engineers know that return on investment is a funny thing. It's kind of made up. Like there's a lot of like make believe, but that's okay. I think we all understand it's part of the game we have to play. So the way we think about it is there's a few things. So first things first, we can reduce the need to have a dedicated person to run you an application security program. And that role can cost on average $140,000 a year.
Yeah.
So that can be quite a huge saving. If to get, you know, your 50 people through training is only going to cost you 40 grand, then that's a huge difference. If you want to do it more practically, there's things like we know from surveys and from breach disclosures that for a software team, if there is a security incident, it distracts them from their work for up to 40 hours. So that's a whole full week of work that they're not doing any product innovation. They are focused on fixing this or identifying or researching the bug. So we believe that if you get everyone on your team, so your developers, testers, analysts, architects, everyone doing a bit of security, you reduce the number of bugs you find, which means those 40 hours we don't need to waste on remediating. We also know that it takes about 3 weeks for a team to fix and test a security bug if it is found in production. So again, if we're increasing the visibility on security, we're reducing the number of bugs, which is less 3-week periods fixing things. The other two that we mention is there's a big concept in software development about reducing toil. So toil is activity that feels pointless. It's hard. I'm doing this for the process. I'm not getting any benefit. The product isn't getting any better. So by bringing security in little pieces across all the roles, we can get rid of these big complex security process at the end and just replace it with little things, which makes our lives a lot more fun and gets rid of this big toil chunk. So is it a magic box that's going to reduce all of your vulnerabilities? Absolutely not. But we know that by getting everyone in the software team to do a tiny bit of security, we can make you go faster and we can make it easier to sell to bigger customers and we can get less distraction from fixing bugs. And all of that makes for happy development teams and more secure products.
And are there teams where you thought, it would never work? Like even by implementing those small pieces, it would never work.
I could never tell you that. That would be mean.
Okay.
But I think there's been a long history between software teams and security teams of we haven't always had good relationships. And I think that there is a natural reluctance, a natural skepticism in software teams with security. Sometimes they believe, because they've had bad experiences, it's always going to be terrible. And so I think while, there's no team that, I think is going to be good or bad, you can sometimes tell in an early conversation if they've had a bad experience before. And sometimes they need a little bit more help and encouragement just to know that it doesn't have to be like that. For us, we believe that security is part of software quality, just like observability and scalability and usability. And so when you make it part of the software engineer's world and you say, I trust you, you do this well already, let me help you, that changes the dynamic.
And when you are in a situation where the team that you're like working with, so say you're starting to work with a new company, and most of their engineers are not familiar yet with the concepts of security. They're not aware of very security aware. How much time do you need? And I understand that you spread this, right, like over like a long period of time. So how much time does it take to really see a difference in the way the engineers consider security, in the way they implement security in the everyday practices? Like, is it 1 week, or is it a month? Is it 6 months? Is it like a year?
In all honesty, when we do it well, the shift can be really quick.
Okay.
So the understanding that, oh, this actually matters and this isn't too hard, we can get that done in 15 minutes.
Okay.
So sometimes it's just using the right language at the right time and showing things in the right way.
Okay.
To get it into your practices takes more time because now we're building up skills. But going from this doesn't matter to me to, oh, hang on, yeah, this does matter to me, that's not very long at all.
Okay. So you compromise their applications and you show them how risky it is not to be prepared for
Oh,
security.
sadly not. No,
No.
that was me in a former life.
It's a joke.
Yeah. No,
and
to be honest, I think, one thing that a software developer can do to really help them get into security is to do that for themselves. Break the things you build. It's fun and it's a creative way to think about this. So.
yeah.
Do you have like an example of a story where like implementing the training actually had, a huge impact that you're maybe personally proud of, or like where, developer actually broke things and then you came in and by security training it was, fixed?
I love this. It would make me sound like a superhero. To be honest, the one I'm most proud of is there is a high growth startup that uses our platform. And normally people talk about secure development. They talk about the coders, the people writing software. They don't talk about all the other roles. And we got an email from a head of security at this high growth company saying, hey, I need you to know what just happened. So the QA team, who were normally very shy, very quiet people, just sort of did their job, had not only signed up and done their training all on their own, but they then organized a presentation and made all of the developers and the senior leaders come and then told them why they were all doing security wrong and how they were going to help them fix it. And so they'd gone on this adventure from nothing to deciding to do some training, to working together to then plan how they were going to make things better, and then engaging their whole senior team to make that happen. And I was so proud of them because until that point, the reason the CISO emailed me, he was like, this team never talked to me. Like, I didn't even know who they were. And now they've just built us an AppSec program. And so I guess thank you, but also what did you do? Because this doesn't happen. You don't normally have pockets of people who can go, hey, actually, this doesn't need to be hard. We can do this. And then they can bring themselves together and make the next step. So I'm incredibly proud whenever a team sees value and then they go, hey, yeah, cool, we can fix this. Because when a development team says we can do this, you know it's going to happen because they're engineers. They solve problems. So if they believe in the problem, they'll get it done.
Does it happen sometimes too that also apart from like QA and development teams or security teams that other teams come within and want to do a security training?
Oh, absolutely. So in terms of growth of the company, I'd say, so we have a steady stream of new customers coming in, but of our existing customers, we see at least 50% of our monthly revenue as expansion, where they will go, hey, we're doing it in our team, and they'll go and talk to somebody and they'll say, hey, we're doing a thing. Would you like to do the thing? And then they'll come and bring the new team on. And so we tend to go from a little tiny pocket to then the entire development team in an organization, which can be thousands of engineers.
Oh, wow.
It's very fun because you speak about a lot about the situation of the CISO that is surprised that his engineer or her engineers are actually curious about security, and they come and they say, hey, we want more security. Because when I speak to CISO, in most cases, they know one single engineer in the whole organization that loves security. and it's like, their favorite engineer of all engineers, and they're like, yeah, this person, he's a great person because they love security, and it's very surprising because they feel like not understood, I believe, by most engineers in general.
Absolutely. Yeah, and for us, it's unusual. Many security companies sell to the CISO. The CISO supports our sale, but for us, we talk to the head of engineering. So we're actually, I kind of see us as half of the equation. We're helping development come to security, and then the folks who are helping out the CISOs are helping come to development. So we'll kind of meet somewhere in the middle.
Can you give us an example of the kind of training that you put in place or the practices that you make your developers to learn?
Sure, absolutely. So we have different programs and items for different roles. So we have things for people who write code, DevSecOps, testers, UX people, product people. So every role has something they can do. And everything we do fits in a different stage of the software development lifecycle. So most traditional security training happens at the coding implementation stage. But we do things through design, the implementation, deployment, and maintenance. So what we can do is in the first 15 minutes of using the platform, you can answer some questions. There's 5 questions. It's very, very quick.
Okay.
You can set some goals, whether it's compliance or whether you want to build culture. And we have then over 360 different items that we can put together like a giant Lego set into a custom training program for your team. So if you've got developers and testers but no analysts, then we'll give you the paths that you need for that. And everyone will get a path that has goals and deadlines that delivers a little bit of training and some practical elements to them regularly. So you can roll out a whole AppSec education program in a few minutes. And that's really, really easy. If you don't have a lot of time, this is great. The other thing is we mix very practical things with education. So we don't believe that everything is about just learning. We want to teach you as quickly as possible what you need to know to change behavior. So that means our training can be very short, sometimes 2 to 3 minutes, but it goes from nothing to, oh, I can do that thing. So it's very time focused. And then we give you templates and playbooks. We have seminars and interviews with guests. Like this morning, we just interviewed Adam Showstack about threat modeling. And so you've got this entire program of continual things that are very practical, that are very specific to your role. And we find that very, very easy to digest then. So your whole team can be engaged.
Great. Okay. So it's very complete, like the complete process is inside of the platform, and you can find like things for developers and even UX, like UX security for UX people. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't even know it existed.
It's the first course globally that we've ever seen.
Oh,
so
really?
we develop all of our content ourselves, and we do a lot of research. And yeah, there's nothing out there for product people. There's nothing out there for UX. And we believe it's very important for security to start at design.
Okay, interesting. And overall, like if we take a step back, you have probably observed that the tech and software industry has seen a lot of changing things in the past years, and there have been a lot of layoffs at the big tech companies. Do you think those rounds of layoffs in big tech companies has affected somehow the security training for engineers?
I think it has been a challenging year. I think last year it was about 250,000 people were laid off in tech. And even so far this year, I think the number's somewhere around 30,000 at a minimum. And that's a lot. I would say companies are definitely being more careful with their budget, which is affecting training. And also, even though we're laying off people, we're not reducing the amount of new software that we want to build. And that's really hard. You can't say, hey, you've got half people and you still need to do the same job. So I think in the next few months, the industry really will need to realize it can't have both. It either needs to have good people doing the job or it needs to do less. I think security is just as important. And I think that's why tools like ours are important right now, is most organizations can't afford to have a specialist on team, and they can't afford the disruption of security training taking 80 hours and needing a whole 2 weeks of effort to do. So because we're bite-sized, because we're trying to be flexible, I think that's an advantage, but it is challenging out there for everyone.
And in this case, you usually provide, for example, for the teams who do not have like 80 hours, per week to spend on training, do you provide them with this like blocks and templates and kind of homework?
Absolutely. So we when we create a learning path for somebody, we split it into what we call batches, but you could call it sprints, whatever you liked. And so we'll say, hey, if your goal is to get compliance with X by this date, we'll split it into monthly batches. So you need to do an hour a month for the next 8 months. So it's a way of breaking it down and making it much more manageable around your very busy workload.
And I also saw like you have a homework section on your podcast, because build amazing things, because I checked out some episodes. I think your recent one was like on application security, and that was great. So where did the idea come from for that homework section?
So the podcast exists because I love stories. I love meeting people who are building software in all sorts of fields and just talking to them and listening. And the reason I put a homework section in is that, it's great to just listen to some things and just like enjoy it. But for us, sometimes the people that I'm talking to have got really good guidance. Like they're giving some really good advice of things you could try. And so I try and make it really obvious for the listener to go, right, if you were going to just take 1 or 2 things from this that you might go away and do, here's what you want to do. And that turns it from just something that you listen to something that maybe changes your world in a little way. So that's what we try and do.
Okay. And what is your favorite episode or like favorite story?
Oh, that's like choosing your favorite child.
Okay.
You can't do that on a podcast.
Top 3.
Look, I've had some really wonderful chats. Joey Stanford from platform.sh is just truly a lovely guy, and he mixes privacy and security in a very human way. Tanya Janka is, she's an institution in AppSec. It's always a delight to talk to her. This morning I recorded an episode that's not out yet, but it will be out very soon, where we talked about threat modeling and Star Wars, and it was great. It was a lot of fun. So, I do it because I love the conversations, and I've been very lucky to have some wonderful guests.
It's very nice. I think that's why also part of why we like to do the podcast, because we hear like all those, different stories and different opinions, because sometimes opinions can be also contradictory, so it's, and like hear people like asking, oh, that's a super challenging question. That's so nice. And actually what you mentioned before about UX and security, I think 1 week ago, one of our product designers, she came to me and she told I would really like podcast episodes on like UX and security. So if you have any tips, we can talk about it afterwards.
Perhaps we can come. We can have another chat sometime, and we have a jam on UX security. I'd love that.
Yeah, for sure. So. Do you, apart from like the podcast, do you have any advice or recommendations, for developers or for other people who want to learn more about like how to implement security training or security in general? Yeah.
So the thing is that the most important thing you can do is accept 2 things. Accept that security is just part of good quality software. Once we stop kind of thinking of it as separate, it actually just becomes part of our job, and then we just get on with it because that's what engineers do. The other thing is to understand that there's no such thing as an application that is truly safe. So I've heard people say, oh, well, we've never been hacked, or nobody even knows we exist, so they'll never hack us.
I've heard that too.
Yeah,
I've heard that one.
Absolutely. And the reality is, some people get hacked because they're very big, well-known companies and it's targeted, but the majority is opportunistic. You just happen to be using a technology that they know how to exploit. Or maybe you use AWS or Azure and they want to mine Bitcoins today. So sometimes those attacks aren't personal. And so when you accept that it can happen to all of us, and it stops being this debate, do I need to care or do I not care? Then we just get on with the next stage. The next stage is, cool, okay, bad things could happen. That sucks. But what can I do about it? So, and that comes down to your preventing. What can I stop from happening? Detecting, how do I know something bad is happening? Because many of us wouldn't know because we haven't really thought about that in our designs yet. And then what would I do if it all went wrong? And having even a really rough plan as an application developer of what you would do if there was a software security incident can make a big difference when it comes to then dealing with those issues. So I think half of it is just kind of admitting to ourselves, it's much like doing exercise every day. We just got to do it. It's not optional. So it's not about motivation. It's about focus and consistency and just getting it done. And then once you accept that, as an engineer, we are fundamentally very lazy. And that's a superpower. Because when you know you have to do something and you know you don't particularly want to do it, you will engineer your way out of it. You'll automate things. You'll come up with libraries. You will make this so you don't have to spend a lot of time on it. And that's a wonderful thing. So as an engineer, embrace your engineering superpowers and make security easy for yourself. That way, you're going to get on with the innovation and the fun stuff you want to do.
For sure. And do you also have like a favorite, online resource where people actually, maybe like implement gamification for themselves, or I don't know, book or a video, like YouTube channel to recommend?
So you can find a whole bunch of stuff on SafeStack's YouTube channel, so do get stuck in there. The other thing is we have a free plan. So if you want to just get started and just do some bits of education just to get going, you can invite up to 50 people and just do essential courses free of charge. So if you go over to safestack.io, sign up for a free trial, you'll get a 2-week free trial of everything. And then at the end of the free trial, it goes over to our free community plan. And so you can get started, roll out a little education program for you and your team, no charge.
Great. It's super cool, actually. And you mentioned that you wrote a book, right, when you started. What's the name of the book?
So I have two. I have the dodgy little book covers up on my wall here. So there's Agile Application Security, which was published by O'Reilly. And the second one is called Security for Everyone. And that is that's an interesting book, actually, for your audience. It goes from being an individual up to being a company that's ready for IPO or acquisition. And for each stage, the security you should be considering in your organization. So it's a really practical guide. It's all how to do it yourself because many of those folks don't have big budgets. So check it out. I think it's like $35, so much cheaper than hiring a consultant.
Very cool. That's a very nice topic, actually. Very, very nice idea and concept.
Thanks.
Well, thanks a lot for all insightful and practical advice. I think, that's what our audience actually loves. I think we could see that when we get into, practical advice, it's really appreciated. So that's great. And I'll share links with the listeners under the video afterwards. So
Wonderful.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for your time. It was a great episode. And
thank you, Laura.
Awesome.
It was great having you.
Thank you for having me.